The sky above Andara 7 was the color of old steel, heavy with ash and the dim shimmer of toxic cloud drift. Storms had passed through the region 3 days earlier, acidic rains stripping bark from trees, corroding metal, and waking the planet's dormant scars. The ruins of the colony settlement were quiet now, too quiet for Sergeant Liam Keel's liking. He moved slowly through the debris, boots crunching against fractured glass and fused stone, his rifle lowered, but never forgotten. He wasn't supposed to be here alone. His team had split up on recon, standard procedure. Except no one had expected a signal from a forgotten sector. And when it pinged on his comms, faint and flickering with static, Liam had veered off course without waiting for orders. His gut told him what the chain of command wouldn't. Sometimes, saving one was worth the risk. He ducked under a collapsed awning, navigating the skeletal remains of what once had been a market square. Stray drones hovered lifeless in mid-collapse, like toys abandoned mid-play. The scent of ozone and scorched carbon still lingered despite the days-old storm. Liam was used to silence, but this one was weighted. Then he heard it. At first he thought it was wind. A soft sound carried on the sharp breath of the air, but it came again, a high, fractured note, somewhere between a cry and a plea. He followed it. Around a bent support beam, past a collapsed data tower still sparking with ghostlight, he found her. A child. Alien. Small. Barefoot. Her skin was a smooth lilac, mottled with dirt and bruises. Thin appendages curled around her knees as she crouched beside a bundle that barely resembled a body. And her eyes, enormous, glistening, silvery like moonlight on metal, locked onto Liam's face as he approached. Not in fear, in desperation. "Please," she said. Her voice cracked. She took a step forward, clutching a cloth bundle to her chest. "My mother is shaking and shivering. Please, please, she will die." The words froze him in place. Not the language, his translator chip caught it easily. It was the tone. It was raw. Real, a sound too old for a voice so young. He lowered his weapon, dropped to one knee. "Where is she?" The child pointed a trembling hand toward the shadows beneath a half-collapsed ceiling. Without hesitation, Liam slid his pack off and crawled forward. The mother lay curled in the wreckage, her body convulsing in fits. Her skin, once likely radiant like her daughter's, had paled to a dull grayish tone. Her breathing was rapid and shallow, her limbs spasmed uncontrollably. Liam recognized the symptoms instantly. Neurospasmatic toxin exposure. "Damn it," he muttered. "She's freezing from the inside." He shouted back to the girl. "What's your name?" "Alara," she answered quietly. "All right, Alara," he said, already opening his med kit. "I need you to stay very still and very quiet. I'm going to try and help her." She nodded. Liam injected the woman with a general neural suppressant, trying to buy time before the convulsions escalated into full cardiac arrest. The medicine was calibrated for human systems, but it would stabilize her. Maybe. He pulled out his thermal blanket, wrapped it tight around her torso, and used a makeshift generator from his pack to provide gentle pulses of warmth through the lining. Alara crawled closer without a word and took her mother's hand in hers, humming softly under her breath. It was a broken lullaby, the notes halting as if sung only from memory. "She hasn't eaten in 3 days," Alara whispered. "We lost our home. She gave me her share of food." Liam didn't answer. He focused on her mother's vitals, watching as her pulse rate began to slow. "Stabilizing, but barely. You found me just in time," he said. Alara said nothing, but she leaned against him, small and trembling. And Liam, without thinking, let his arm curve around her shoulders, steadying her. In the war zones of Earth, he'd seen cities burn and soldiers fall, but nothing had pierced him the way that girl's voice had. That night, in the ruins of a world that had forgotten its own name, a soldier sat between two strangers and chose not to be a weapon. He chose to stay. Rain began again, not the acid kind. This one was warm, clean, blessed, perhaps, by the colony's failing atmosphere, filters struggling to rebalance themselves. Liam had wrapped Ayla, Alara's mother, in every bit of thermal he had. He reinforced their shelter with a collapsed door frame and a few slabs of ferrocrete, creating a hollow just large enough to keep them dry. He had no orders to be here. He didn't care. Alara clung to her mother, whose spasms had quieted into shallow sleep. Her breathing was still thin, but steady enough for now. The toxin's damage would need more than what Liam carried: full medbay access, hydration drips, and a proper diagnosis, but at least he'd bought her time. Alara sat beside him now, hugging her knees. She'd stopped crying, but her eyes hadn't stopped watching him. "Why did you come here?" she asked. Liam tossed another heat cell beneath the blanket. "Caught a distress ping, could have been a trap. But you came anyway." "I've walked away from cries before," he said, voice low. "Not anymore." Alara nodded slowly. "You don't look like the other ones." "Other ones?" "The ones who burned our city. They wore armor, like yours, but they didn't help." "I'm not with them." She didn't press further. Trust would take time. He offered her a ration bar, which she accepted cautiously. She broke it in half, then hesitated, until he smiled and nodded. She kept one half and placed the other gently beside her mother's mouth, just in case she woke. "I used to have 3 siblings," she said softly. "My father took them when the war started. He said he'd come back, but he never did." Liam looked out at the jagged skyline of a world torn apart. "No one should be left behind," he muttered. "You didn't leave," she said. "No," he agreed, "I didn't." He didn't say it aloud, but he had no plans to leave again. The next few hours were quiet. Alara drifted to sleep beside her mother, her head on Liam's arm. The night was cold, but not cruel. The wind hummed through the twisted metal like an old song. And Liam, once a soldier among thousands, now sat in the ruins with a child and her dying mother, guarding them with a rifle in one hand and hope in the other. He didn't know how far rescue was, didn't know what waited in the shadows beyond the broken city. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty: he would not let them die. Morning broke like a bruised eyelid, gray and reluctant to open. A mist hung low over the ruins, diffusing what little light the fractured atmosphere allowed. Liam woke first, his body stiff from sleeping upright against a half-collapsed wall. His rifle rested across his lap, and on his right side, little Alara still slept, clutching the hem of his jacket like a tether. Ayla, her mother, remained unconscious, but her vitals, checked every hour through the night, were holding steady. It was a small miracle, and Liam knew it. Without advanced treatment soon, though, holding steady would eventually turn into a slow, irreversible decline. She needed a real medbay, not a patchwork soldier's care. He shifted carefully, trying not to wake Alara. His comm unit had a weak signal. Not enough to reach command directly, but enough to bounce a local emergency ping. He tapped out a coded beacon, standard rescue request, high priority, and set it on repeat. He didn't expect a quick response. Triage teams had long since abandoned these broken zones. Command would see 1 unimportant sergeant and 2 alien civilians and shuffle the request into a pile behind dozens of higher-value assets. But he sent it anyway. Sometimes you did the right thing because it was right, not because it would be answered. He spent the early hours scavenging. He found an old market droid jammed in the rubble, its service core still intact. From it, he ripped a thermal coil, a working water purifier, and 2 emergency ration packs. They would buy more time. A few more precious days. Returning to the shelter, he found Alara awake, her knees tucked to her chest, eyes dark with worry. "You left?" she said, her voice small but hard. "Only for supplies? I promised I'd stay." She bit her lip and looked down at her mother's still figure. "I dreamed you left and didn't come back." "I'm not leaving," Liam said, crouching in front of her, placing the salvaged goods beside them. "Not until she's safe. Not until you're safe." Alara didn't smile, but she nodded. A slow, measured motion that seemed heavier than a child should carry. He handed her the purifying straw and taught her how to drink from the nearby standing water safely. He showed her how to check her mother's breathing and how to recognize a change in her pulse. Little things. Survival things. Things he should never have to teach a child. Yet she learned without complaint, her small hands careful and precise. When the rain returned that afternoon, warm and thick, they sat together beneath the makeshift tarp Liam had rigged, eating stale rations and listening to the drumming on the plastic above them. "Where are you from?" Alara asked between bites. "Earth," Liam said. "Is it broken too?" He thought about it. About the slums, the ration riots, the endless deployments. About how the rich lived in glass towers and the poor fought over protein bars on cracked sidewalks. "A little," he admitted. "Maybe your mother is shaking somewhere," she said quietly. He blinked, caught off guard by the innocence of the observation. "Maybe," he said, "but I'm here now, with you." And as the rain fell and the world outside dissolved into a blur of broken colors, Liam Keel sat beside a shivering alien girl and her dying mother. And in the smallest of spaces between breaths, he understood something vital. Saving them wasn't his mission. It was his redemption. The next 2 days blurred into each other like oil and smoke. The emergency beacon continued its endless, unanswered pulse. Liam built a stronger shelter, scavenging more sheet metal from the ruins. He set up makeshift barricades with debris, marking a clear perimeter. He booby-trapped the weakest entry points with simple alarms, tripwires tied to tin cans and broken drone parts. Crude but effective. His instincts, owned by years of war, screamed that they weren't alone out here. Alara helped, carrying small pieces, fetching water, applying patches of sealant with careful precision. She never complained. She moved with a grim determination that made her seem far older than her years. At night, Liam told her stories, not about Earth, not about the wars. He told her stories about a place where gardens grew tall as buildings, where rivers ran clear and deep, where skies stayed blue forever. He made up cities with singing streets and mountains that whispered dreams. And Alara listened, curled against him beneath the tarp, her eyes wide, her breath slow and steady. On the third night, the alarms rattled. Liam was on his feet instantly, rifle ready. Alara stirred, clinging to her mother as Liam moved silently to the edge of their shelter. Through the drifting mist, he saw them. 2 figures, not human, not Andorran, scavengers, pirates who prowled the dead colonies, stripping anything of value, resources, tech, sometimes people. They moved slowly, carefully, scanning the ruins with handheld sensors. Liam felt his heart pound against his ribs. He had 1 rifle, half a magazine, no backup. He watched the scavengers draw closer, whispering to each other in a clipped, guttural language. If they found the shelter, it would end badly. Not for him, for Alara and Ayla. Liam shifted back, crouching low beside Alara. She looked up at him, her tiny face pale. "Stay quiet," he whispered. She nodded, her small hand squeezing his. He thought fast. No heroics, no firefights. He needed them to go away. Reaching into his pack, he grabbed one of the broken drone pieces he had salvaged earlier. A powered data core. Dangerous if overloaded. He sprinted to the far edge of the ruins, keeping low, and jammed the core beneath a pile of wreckage. Then he set a timer. 30 seconds. He ran back to the shelter, crouched low over Alara and her mother, shielding them with his body. The explosion ripped through the ruins, loud and blinding, sending a plume of fire and smoke into the sky. The scavengers shouted in alarm. Sensors would read it as a catastrophic collapse. Dangerous, unstable, not worth the risk. Moments later, Liam heard their retreat, footsteps fading fast. He exhaled slowly. Alara looked up at him, her eyes wide and scared. "You scared them," she said. He nodded. "Had to." She stared at him for a long moment. Then, without a word, she leaned forward and pressed her forehead to his chest. And Liam, who had spent most of his life bracing against the world, let himself wrap his arms around her. Outside, the ruins smoked and the rain hissed against burning stone. But inside their tiny shelter, for one moment, there was only quiet. Only safety. Only the fragile, stubborn beginning of something worth saving. By the 5th day, the city began to whisper again. Not with voices or alarms, but with the slow, eerie hum of energy returning to old veins. Somewhere nearby, a forgotten generator had flickered to life, perhaps shocked into motion by the drone core explosion. Liam heard it through the metal bones of the ruins, that thrum of unstable power vibrating faintly beneath the ground. It unsettled him. Ayla still slept, drifting between shallow consciousness and long bouts of fever. Her body was fighting, but losing ground slowly. Liam had done everything he could with the limited tools in his medkit. Her neural activity was stable, but dangerously low. She wasn't dying yet, but she was close. He tried again to reroute the emergency signal through the scavenged drone parts. This time, he gained a flicker of range, just enough to latch onto a comm satellite in low orbit. Static buzzed into his ear. "Unit 7, repeat, signal is faint, ID yourself." Liam's heart jumped. He snapped upright, pressing the mic. "Sergeant Liam Kale, Human Coalition responding to distress beacon ping. 2 Andorran civilians in critical condition. Request medical evac. Grid Alpha 23 Beta. Confirm." Silence. Then, "Copy Sergeant Kale, confirmed location, closest med team ETA 17 hours. 17. It was both a blessing and a death sentence. Too long for Ayla, too short to give up. He looked over at the child sleeping beside her mother. Alara had finally collapsed from exhaustion, her body curled protectively around Ayla's arm. She had barely spoken in the past 12 hours, her focus entirely on her mother's breathing, on counting each rise and fall like it was the last thing anchoring her to reality. Liam leaned against the wall, rubbing his forehead. His back ached, his legs throbbed. He hadn't slept more than a few minutes at a time, but something stronger than exhaustion held him upright. Duty. Yes, but more than that, an instinct he hadn't felt in years. He cared, not because he had to, but because somewhere between the wreckage and the whispering walls of this broken city, these two had become his. Alara stirred. Is she getting worse? Liam didn't lie. Yes. Then we have to do something. He looked at her. We are. It's not enough. Her words weren't childish. They were measured, accusing. Liam nodded once. Then we'll do more. He left before dawn, rigging the shelter with proximity sensors. He made his way toward the generator hum, crossing into the unstable zone of the Eastern District. It had once been the heart of the city, energy conduits, substation nodes, old medical outposts. He found one. It was nearly gutted. The walls had collapsed inward, but the lower levels were intact. Inside, he found two miracles. A portable power cell and a field med module still intact, its screen blinking for the first time in who knows how many years. He dragged both back through enemy zones, his rifle slung low, body burning with effort. When he returned to the shelter, Alara was waiting. She didn't cheer. She didn't run. She simply looked at him with those vast silver eyes and said, "Did you find hope?" Liam dropped the module beside Ayla. I found a reason to keep going. Together, they connected the power cell. The med module scanned Ayla's body, humming with artificial calm. Toxin identified, Lurian strain, autoserum compilation in progress. Estimated time, 2 hours. Alara's face cracked for the first time in days. She wept. And Liam held her, one arm around her shoulders, as the city outside watched in silence. 2 hours became 3. The med module's slow beeping echoed through the shelter. Every second stretched like thread pulled too tight. Alara stood beside her mother, holding Ayla's hand, whispering into her skin. Liam paced, checked sensors, rechecked the outer perimeter. He barely breathed. When the module released the serum, he administered it without hesitation. The clear fluid slid into Ayla's veins, and for a long time nothing changed. Then Ayla's breath hitched, her eyes fluttered, and she whispered, "Alara." The girl fell into her arms with a cry that shattered the silence like glass. Ayla wrapped her arms weakly around her daughter, her head resting against Alara's. Her body still trembled, but life had returned. Her pulse was stronger. Her skin warmed beneath Liam's fingers. "She's going to make it," he said, stepping back, his voice hollow with relief. Alara turned to him, her eyes red, her cheeks wet, but she smiled. A real smile, the first Liam had ever seen. "You didn't let her die." "No," he said, kneeling down to her level. "And neither did you." She launched forward, hugging him tightly. Liam froze for a second, stunned. Then he let his arms fold around her small frame. They stayed like that for a long time until Ayla's soft voice called her daughter back, and Alara ran to her side, holding her like she'd never let go again. Liam stepped outside into the rising dawn. The air was clearer now. The mist had thinned. Far above, the sky was streaked with gold and gray, and for the first time since he landed, he could see the shape of a moon cresting the curve of the planet. He tapped his comm. "This is Kale. Situation stabilized, civilian confirmed alive, holding for evac." "Copy, Kale. We're inbound. 17 minutes. He closed the comm and exhaled. Then something stirred nearby. A shadow moved, a flicker of heat on his HUD. He turned fast, weapon raised. 3 figures emerged from the ruins, scavengers, armed, alerted by the explosion from days earlier perhaps, or by the same signal he had sent for rescue. They didn't speak, just approached, blades drawn, eyes hungry. Liam didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, shielding the shelter, rifle steady. "You're not getting through," he said. They moved. He moved faster. The firefight was short, personal. 2 went down. The 3rd fled, wounded. Liam stood alone in the aftermath, his side bleeding from a deep cut. He didn't flinch. He turned back toward the shelter. Alara stood in the doorway watching. "You're hurt," she said. "I've been worse. You didn't have to protect us like that." "I did," he said, "because I'm not a soldier here." "Then what are you?" He smiled, blood still dripping down his arm. I'm the fire that stayed. The evac ship came like a ghost, humming low over the broken city with its wings wide and its engines quiet. Liam stood at the edge of the shelter, body rigid despite the deep gash across his ribs. His side was wrapped in gauze soaked through twice already, but he showed no signs of slowing. Pain, like so many things, had become background noise. Alara held her mother's hand tightly as they stepped toward the landing zone Liam had cleared, an old plaza now covered in soot and blood. Ayla was stronger now, her steps steady if slow, her face pale but alive. Every few seconds, she glanced at her daughter as though afraid she'd disappear. Liam had seen that look in other survivors, the ones who'd lost too much too fast. As the ship descended, its rear hatch opened, revealing a pair of medics and a tall officer in a pristine black uniform. Coalition standard, polished, stiff, expressionless. His name tag read Collier. He approached Liam first. Sergeant Cale, Colonel. We received your report. Unorthodox protocol. Unauthorized detour. No confirmed orders to respond to a low-level beacon. I know, Liam said, standing straighter. You disobeyed standing recon instructions, and you engaged hostiles alone. I did. Collier studied him. Why? Liam looked past him at Alara and Ayla, who stood watching from the foot of the ramp, still holding each other. Because a little girl asked me to. Collier's jaw tensed, then released. He tapped his datapad. The civilians will be transported to the off-world medical facility on Eltari Prime. You've been given temporary medical leave. Report to your commanding unit after recovery for review. Liam said nothing. He walked slowly toward Ayla and Alara. The medics moved in, scanning Ayla with gentle hands, attaching her to a stabilizer chair. She tried to speak but coughed instead, still weak. Alara held her hand tighter. When Liam reached them, Alara stepped forward. You're coming with us, she said. He shook his head gently. Not now. But you said you wouldn't leave. I said I wouldn't let her die. And I didn't. Alara's face fell. But you're our. She didn't finish. Her throat closed too tightly around the word. Liam crouched despite the ache in his ribs. I'm not gone. I'll find you. After the dust clears, after they stop seeing me as a risk and start seeing what I did for what it was. Ayla reached for him with a trembling hand. You didn't just save us. You stayed. That matters more than any uniform you wear. He gave a half smile. I didn't know I still had it in me. You never lost it, she said. Alara wrapped her arms around him. He closed his eyes and held her tightly, his hand cradling the back of her head. I don't want to go without you, she whispered. He pulled back, looking into her silver eyes. Then take me with you, inside, just for now, until I come back. The medics ushered them gently onto the ship. Liam stood in the exhaust wind as the ramp closed. Alara pressed her hand to the glass and Liam raised his own. The ship rose, and the sky, broken, ash-stained, blood-hued, watched them all with a silence that felt almost holy. The days after their departure were slow, dreamlike. Liam stayed in the city ruins, tending to wounds no one else could see. Coalition Command suspended his duty, investigation pending. No charges filed, but no commendations either. It didn't matter. He returned to the shelter, repaired it, reinforced it, not because he needed it, but because it had mattered. The walls still echoed with Alara's laughter, the floor still bore the marks where Ayla had laid. He planted flowers where the scavengers had fallen, not to honor the dead, but to remind himself that life could grow even where blood had been spilled. One night, the wind shifted, not violent, gentle, carrying a new smell, clean water, pollen, distant greenery. The planet was beginning to breathe again. He stood beneath the stars, rifle slung across his back, not as a weapon, but a memory, and he whispered names into the dark, names he had once forgotten. Alara, Ayla, the girl with the voice strong enough to stop a soldier, the mother who taught him that stillness was not weakness. Weeks later, a message came through, encrypted, faint. We made it. Mother as well. I'm learning your stories. I think of the fire that stayed. Please come soon. It wasn't signed. It didn't have to be. Liam Keel looked out at the skyline of the wounded world and finally allowed himself to feel the weight of everything he had held. Then he gathered his things, cleaned his weapon, packed the blanket that still smelled faintly of lavender oil and ash, and he walked toward the future. Not to find them, but to join them. Because sometimes the fire didn't have to burn everything down. Sometimes it was the only thing that stayed lit long enough for someone else to find their way home. Liam didn't leave immediately. Even after Alara's message arrived, raw, honest, full of quiet hope, he remained in the ruin for 3 more nights. He wasn't waiting for orders. He had stopped asking permission the moment he chose to save her mother. But some part of him understood that leaving too quickly would feel like betrayal. Not of the mission, but of the place itself. This broken city had become a witness to Alara's courage, to Ayla's survival, to his own resurrection. He spent his final days walking the perimeter one last time, reactivating old beacons, mapping salvage zones that could be used for rebuilding. He left notes on the comm logs for any coalition teams who might wander in after him. How to navigate the debris fields, where the poison mist still clung too thick, where the ground was ready for planting again. Before he departed, he carved something onto the inside wall of the shelter. A small plaque, etched into a piece of salvaged alloy plating. Where one stayed, others lived. He didn't bring much, just what he could carry. The rifle, cleaned and reassembled, went back into its case, not out of necessity, out of respect. He walked for 3 days across the broken ridges of Andar's eastern spine, passing half-buried ruins and forests regrown wild in the absence of war. He traveled on foot because he wanted to feel the ground again, wanted to walk the world, not just fly above it. At dusk on the 4th day, a civilian shuttle passed low overhead, its beacon pinging his personal identifier. "Sergeant Kale," the pilot said over comms, "I believe we have someone waiting for you." Liam exhaled. He finally boarded. The shuttle was small, quiet. The pilot didn't ask questions, didn't need to. Liam sat by the window, watching the world fall away beneath them. Those rust-colored plains, those jagged spires of metal and bone. He didn't feel like a man leaving a battlefield. He felt like someone returning from exile. Eltari Prime glowed from orbit like a jewel, a world untouched by the wounds Liam had known. Its sky was rich with layered suns, its air thick with the scent of life. Medical domes gleamed along the hillsides, and beyond them, residential sanctuaries dotted the terrain like whispers of peace. They met him on the landing pad. Ayla stood first, thinner than before but radiant. Her skin returned to the soft lavender hue he remembered. She wore simple white linen and no shoes. Her smile when she saw him was like the end of winter. And Alara, she ran before anyone could stop her, her hair bouncing in the wind, her tiny arms outstretched. Liam dropped his pack and met her halfway, kneeling as she crashed into him, nearly knocking him over. "You came," she said into his chest. "I told you I would," he answered, voice rough. Ayla reached them slowly. She didn't speak. She simply placed her hand gently on his shoulder and then leaned down, pressing her forehead to his. It was a gesture from her people, he had learned. A gift of spirit. A vow of recognition. They walked together into the sanctuary gardens, where vines climbed over ancient stone walls, and the ground sparkled with blue moss underfoot. Alara took his hand and led him to a small corner she called the firebed. It was where she planted her favorite flowers, bright orange and red petals that she insisted looked like flickering flames. "I wanted you to see this," she said. "It grows because you stayed." He crouched beside her. "So do you." She looked up at him, then nodded solemnly. Later, as the suns dipped below the hills and the shadows grew long and gold, Liam sat with Ayla beneath the trees. No weapons, no uniforms, just hands, just warmth. "You changed her," Ayla said softly. "She changed me," he answered. "She still calls you the fire that stayed." He smiled. "I'll be whatever she needs me to be." "You already are." In the distance, Alara played with other children, her laugh cutting through the air like a bell. A soldier had once landed on a dead world with orders and a rifle. Now he sat in a garden, wrapped in peace he never thought he deserved. Not because he saved lives, but because he refused to walk away from a cry in the ruins. Because he chose to stay, when no one else did. And now, in a world that once only knew sorrow, something rare and new had bloomed. Home.